A man who survived the end of the world would think he understood the meaning of ruin. Then he would arrive in the 41st millennium and learn that his wasteland had been small. On his world, the roads ended in dust, in hunger, in the bones of dead cities. In this galaxy, the roads ran through planets that had burned for 10,000 years, under skies blackened by war, beneath the gaze of an empire so vast it had forgotten entire worlds and called that mercy. Here, fuel was holy. Engines were prayed over. Men died for a mouthful of water, and whole armies died for a single functioning machine. In a universe like that, Max Rockatansky did not arrive as a hero. He arrived as what he had always been, a man with a car, a gun, and just enough instinct to live one more day. The world was called Varnak IV on old Imperial charts, though nobody living still used that name. The few who remembered simply called it the Long Road. Once it had been a manufactorum world, one of 1,000 iron lungs that fed the Imperium's war machine. It had produced engines, munitions, chassis, drive assemblies, track links, armored hulls, axle columns, auger parts, and fuel by the ocean. Then came plague in the lower hives, rebellion in the upper foundries, orbital bombardment from a fleet too impatient to retake the planet properly. And after that came the silence. The administratum adjusted a ledger line somewhere far away. The tithes stopped. The void ships stopped. The priests stopped answering. The world was not declared dead. It was simply forgotten. 3 centuries later, the furnaces were cold. The hive cities were carcasses, and the only thing that still made sense were the roads. They cut across continents in straight black lines, strips of cracked rockcrete and half-melted ceramite laid down when the planet still mattered. They linked refinery fields to dead ports to dead cities to mines long collapsed into poisoned caverns. They connected everything and nothing. The people who remained built lives around them, because the roads were the only places where movement was possible, and movement meant survival. Settlements rose around fuel caches and sank when the tanks ran dry. Warlords crowned themselves over pumping stations. Mad preachers anointed engines with blood and called exhaust smoke a sacrament. Children learned to drive before they learned to read, and most never learned the second thing at all. Across that endless ruin drove a black interceptor with a supercharged V8 that sounded like violence given breath. It should not have existed on a world like Varnak. The machine was too lean, too purposeful, too pure in design. Everything else on the planet had been rebuilt so many times it no longer resembled its original shape. Trucks were fortresses. Bikes were bone-rattling death traps. Haulers became tanks, and tanks became shrines to speed. But the interceptor remained a car, scarred, patched, plated, in places where it had been torn open, but still a car. Long hood, black body, hard lines. It moved like a predator that had never forgotten what it was. Max drove with the easy stillness of a man who had spent too much of his life gripping a wheel. The leather on his jacket was old and sun-cracked. The shotgun on the seat beside him had been sawed down and rebuilt more times than most people on Varnak had eaten a full meal. His canteen held water that tasted of rust and old filters. His fuel cans held a refinery's last insults to chemistry. He had crossed worlds to reach this place, though if you asked him how, he could not have told you. There were storms in his memory, light without sky, roads that should not have existed. After a while, he had stopped asking whether he was lost in space, time, or something worse. The road was the road. A man survived it or he didn't. The interceptor's fuel gauge sat under half. On Varnak, that was not a detail. It was a sentence. Under half meant decisions. Which road to risk? Which gang territory to skim? Which rumor of a cache might be worth the bullets? Which settlement might still remember that he had once helped them and might not shoot on sight? He did not like settlements. Settlements meant people. People meant need. Need turned fast into obligation. And obligation was the first thing the wasteland stripped from a man if it wanted him to live. The horizon shivered red under a ceiling of ash. The remains of Hive Gathrak rose to the east. Miles of leaning towers and broken bridge spans jutting from the desert like the ribs of a dead beast. To the west lay the refinery flats, a wilderness of rusted pipework, collapsed stacks, and sludge basins that still steamed with toxins from wars nobody remembered. Ahead, the road narrowed through an old industrial corridor, lined with skeletal loader cranes. It was the kind of place where men with little ammunition and too much desperation waited for someone else to bleed first. Max saw the warning signs 3 seconds before the trap sprung. Not the tripwire itself, the silence around it. No carrion birds, no drifting scavenger dogs, no movement in the gantries. Even the wind felt held. Then the wire snapped against his front axle. A bell began to ring somewhere high in the ruins. Once, twice, then a chorus, iron tongues striking steel. A signal passed from crane to crane. Max did not curse. Men who cursed at ambushes were still surprised by them. He dropped a gear and flattened the accelerator. The interceptor kicked hard, supercharger whining, rear tires hurling grit. Gunfire cracked from both sides of the road. Heavy, crude, badly aimed. But there was enough of it to turn luck into statistics. The first raider truck burst from under a collapsed magrail arch. It was a flatbed cargo hauler turned war rig, plated in scrap and ringed with spikes, the cab front painted with a grinning metal skull. Men in welding masks and prayer rags clung to its sides, firing stub carbines one-handed and screaming devotional nonsense about sacred combustion. The engine faithful. Max had heard them on the Vox frequencies before, chanting about pistons as though they were saints. A second truck came from behind, trying to box him in. 2 dirt bikes skimmed along the flank, riders wrapped in chains, their engines coughing black smoke. Max cut the wheel left just enough to make the first truck commit to the ram. It swerved, driver grinning behind brass goggles, and in that instant Max stamped the brake. The interceptor's nose dipped. The truck overshot by less than a meter. Metal screamed against metal as its rear spikes raked black paint off Max's door. Max dropped the shotgun out the window and fired into the truck's front wheel well. The blast tore through rubber and suspension together. The truck lurched sideways, clipped a support pillar, and rolled in a blossom of sparks and screaming bodies. The bikes came in low and fast. Max did not waste shells. He jerked right, let one rider think he had the angle, then snapped back left. The biker clipped the interceptor's rear quarter, lost balance, and vanished under the wheels of the truck still coming from behind. The second biker stayed smart, hanging off the flank, chain hooked in one hand, trying to snag the bumper. Max could see the man's face now. Sunken cheeks, chrome teeth, eyes so dry and pale they looked blind. Max waited until the biker leaned in, then swerved directly into him. Bone cracked. Bike flipped. Problem solved. The road opened and the ambushers made their mistake. They thought open ground favored numbers. On Varnak, maybe. On an empty stretch of old Imperial road, against a driver who had spent half his life outrunning death. It favored the better machine. The interceptor surged ahead. The remaining truck dropped behind. Gunfire sparked off the rear plating and back glass, but the distance widened with every heartbeat. Max checked the mirror once and saw dust rising farther north. New engines, different pattern. Faster. He knew before he saw the colors. Orcs. They had fallen to Varnak months ago in ramshackle descent craft, drawn by the planet's endless roadways, constant skirmishing, and oceans of salvage. Not a full invasion, something more dangerous for a place like this. A migration of speed freaks. Green-skinned lunatics who believed the loudest engine was the truest argument. They had turned half the northern highways into killing grounds in weeks. They did not build societies. They built races that ended in massacres and called that culture. The dust plume thickened. Shapes emerged inside it, weaving with insane confidence over broken ground. Warbikes first, low and vicious, plated in red because red made them go faster, and somehow, impossibly, it often did. Then buggies bristling with guns. Behind them a monster truck of welded armor and exposed engines roared like a forge collapsing. The raiders behind Max broke formation the moment they saw them. Human courage lasted exactly as long as human certainty. The engine faithful peeled away, abandoning the chase rather than be caught between prey and orcs. Smart. Too late, but smart. The greenskins had seen the interceptor. That made everything else secondary. The lead warbike blasted onto the road and gained with frightening speed. Its rider was huge, even by orc standards, a slab of muscle and iron with exhaust pipes bolted over one shoulder and goggles the size of dinner plates. He bellowed something joyous and swung a chain blade in lazy circles over his head. Max reloaded by feel, one-handed, never taking his eyes off the road. Ahead, the highway cut through the skeleton of a collapsed overpass. Concrete pillars, fallen girders, just enough constriction to turn speed into a weapon if you knew how. He kept steady. The bike gained 20 meters, 15, 10. The orc came alongside, laughing, chainblade raised. Max slammed the wheel toward him. The interceptor's steel shoulder clipped the bike's front assembly. At normal speed, it would have been a sideswipe. At this speed, it became annihilation. The bike cartwheeled in a rain of burning fuel. The orc vanished into the pillars behind in a burst of green flesh and metal. The buggies opened up. Big caliber rounds hammered the roadway ahead, punching fountains of dust and broken rockcrete into the air. One hit the rear quarter. Another punched through the trunk plating. The car fishtailed for half a breath, then bit down again. A shell screamed past the windshield and took the side mirror off. Max did not look back. There was no value in fear once the shooting started. He aimed for the broken overpass and cut through the narrowest gap, close enough that both fenders sparked off concrete. One buggy tried to follow and got greedy on the angle. Its roll cage caught a beam. The whole thing tore apart in a spray of tires, arms, and engine parts. Another made it through but came out wrong, bouncing sideways. Max fired through the window, caught the driver in the face, and watched the buggy drift into a pillar hard enough to fold around it. The monster truck kept coming. Of course it did. It hit the overpass supports, rather than go around them, simply smashing a path clear with raw weight and orc certainty. Concrete detonated outward. Dust swallowed the road. Max burst out the far side into open wasteland and saw, far ahead through the red haze, something geometric rising from the desert. Not a hive spire, not a refinery stack. Too symmetrical, too intact. He drove for it because everything behind him was worse. The structure grew larger as the chase stretched out. Curved plating, towered sensor masts, hull armor eaten by centuries of sand, but still recognizable as voidcraft. An ancient Mechanicus vessel, half buried nose first in the desert, its stern jutting from the wastes like a cathedral nailed into the earth. The interceptor screamed toward the shadow of it. The orcs were still behind, still gaining over rough ground. But on the old service causeways around the wreck, the black car came alive. It danced between collapsed hull plates and cargo cranes, with a precision the orc machines could not match. Two bikes went wide and exploded against the ship's broken flank. The monster truck tried to cut across a dune crust and fell axle-deep into powder sand, roaring and spinning. By the time the remaining orcs found stable footing again, Max had killed the engine beneath the corpse of the ship and vanished into darkness. Inside, the wreck still hummed. That was the first bad sign. The second was the smell. Not rot, not fuel. Incense and ozone. Sacred oil. The kind of air found in machine shrines and manufactorum sanctums, places where men stopped being men by degree and called it devotion. Emergency lumen strips flickered weak green along the corridor walls. Massive cables ran like exposed veins through the ceiling. Servitor tracks grooved the floor. The ship had been dead for centuries, and somehow not died properly. Max moved through the gloom with the shotgun raised, boots silent on ribbed metal decking. Somewhere deeper inside he heard movement. Not the random settling of wreckage, deliberate movement. A metal foot, then another. He rounded a cargo arch and red target beams appeared on his chest. A Scutarius Ranger stood 30 meters away, long rifle-shouldered, hood hanging over a half-metal face. More shapes emerged around him. Thin, red-robed figures trailed by mechadendrites and cable bundles. Tech priests, servitors, not many. Enough. The tallest of them glided forward on articulated limbs that clicked over the deck. What remained of his human body was small inside the machine, built around it. His voice came from a brass grill and sounded like a knife trying to imitate speech. Uncatalogued human. State designation. State purpose. State ownership of external vehicle. Max kept the shotgun low. Passing through. False. Random passers. Through do not operate an anomalous combustion relic of non-compliant patterning. The priest's optics brightened. Data scrolled across a hollow screen projecting from his wrist. The interceptor rotated in wireframe over the dust between them. Every panel, every modification, every weakness. Your machine is of extreme interest, the priest said. You will surrender it for sanctified disassembly. No. The ranger's rifle whined. The priest raised one metal claw and the gun lowered by a fraction. Alternative. You guide this expedition across local road networks. You identify fuel sources, stable routes, hostile enclaves, and technology caches. In exchange, temporary custodial rights of the vehicle remain with you until mission completion. Temporary. Yes. Max looked around the chamber. 11 personnel, if you counted servitors as personnel. One viable exit behind him. One rifle already centered on his spine if he turned. Outside, orcs on the hunt. Inside, zealots with tools sharp enough to call surgery. He had lived long enough to recognize a prison, even when it was politely phrased. What's the mission? The priest's vox crackled with something almost like pride. I am Magos Deltor Vane of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This vessel answered a fragmentary distress beacon before it fell. Before impact, it received encrypted references to deep storage vaults beneath this planet's industrial zones. Standard template derivatives, pre-Imperial pattern archives, lost technologies. We will recover them. Then leave. Impossible. My ship is beyond restoration. My command shuttle never arrived. Therefore, the Omnissiah has altered the shape of the mission. We will complete it on the ground. Max knew that tone. Men who called desperation destiny were the hardest to kill because they believed losing made them more correct. A younger priest stepped forward from the others. She still looked human from a distance. Up close, the differences emerged. Eyes replaced with softly glowing lenses. Fingers jointed too cleanly. One arm half gone beneath folded mechadendrite limbs. Her voice, when she spoke, still remembered being human. Guide us, she said. You know the roads. We know the machines. Both are required. Max glanced back toward the dark, where his interceptor waited beneath the hull breach. He could leave the wreck right then and probably die before dusk. Or stay and maybe choose the place later. He lowered the shotgun another inch. I'll guide. Nothing else. The Magos turned his optics on the younger priest. Adept Lyra, 7 will observe him. That was how Max became part of a Mechanicus convoy across the deadest world he had ever seen. They rolled at dawn. 2 Duneriders salvaged from the wreck. 1 crawler stripped from a cargo hauler and made to obey with more prayer than maintenance. 12 Skitarii marching in lockstep beside them like tireless iron pilgrims. Servitors chained to fuel pumps and augers. Max's interceptor at the front, where the road was clearest and the danger came first. Adept Lyra, 7 rode in the passenger seat, like somebody sitting inside a reliquary. Her lens eyes moved over every surface of the dash, vents, gear stick, switches, seat bolts, cracked trim, patched armor, gauges that had no business still working. She watched the car more than she watched the wastes. It adapts to poor fuel quality, she said after an hour. It should not. It runs. It endures contamination levels that would cripple standard combustion assemblies. Max stared ahead. Maybe it's stubborn. That is not a technical category. It is where I'm from. She was quiet after that, but only for a while. I can hear it, you know, she said eventually. Hear what? The machine spirit. Not in liturgical terms. Not superstition. Response latency. Predictive correction. Load balancing without command lag. It anticipates you. Max said nothing. She was too close to something he preferred not to name. The first depot they reached had once fueled ore convoys. Half the bunker roofs had collapsed, but underground tanks sometimes survived when everything above them died. Max had raided this one long ago until it yielded more sludge than promethium. He told them so. Magos Vane ordered the tanks drilled anyway. That was when the Watchers closed in. They had been there all morning, skimming ridgelines and shadowing the convoy at long range. Road gangs, fuel cultists, scavengers, a few orc outriders. Individually, nothing. Together, a storm waiting for a reason. When the first servitor punched through to buried fuel, the smell carried on the wind. The attack came from every direction. Human war rigs first, engines shrieking. Iconography of a dozen rival road creeds painted over welded plates. The faithful of the spark, the chrome psalmists, the last refiners. Men who would murder each other over a filter cloth had united at the scent of buried fuel. Behind them came the orcs, not organized, not disciplined, just thrilled that a proper fight had begun. The Skitarii formed firing lines with machine perfection. Galvanic rounds cracked across the flats. The lead human truck vanished in blue-white arcs as its systems overloaded and its driver convulsed behind the wheel. Two bikes somersaulted into the dirt. A buggy flipped end over end when a precision volley cut its front axle out from under it. For 10 seconds, it looked as if discipline might matter. Then, sheer numbers hit the perimeter. Max did not wait for orders. Orders got people dead in situations that only instinct could cross. He gunned the interceptor and slashed straight across the front of the attacking warbands instead of pulling back with the convoy. It was a risk, which was another word for a decision you couldn't take back. He cut between two incoming rigs, close enough to scrape paint, and blasted the driver of the nearer one through his open viewport. The dead man's truck veered into the second. Both folded together in a wall of wreckage that forced the next wave to split. The split mattered. It turned one large charge into three smaller ones. That gave the Skitarii firing solutions instead of a blur. Bodies and metal burst across the road. Orcs vaulted through the carnage laughing. One landed on the interceptor's hood and smashed at the windshield with a wrench the size of a child. Max shot him through the glass at point-blank range and drove on with spiderweb cracks spreading in front of him. Another grabbed the roof. Lyra, 7, leaned halfway out the passenger side and drilled it through the eye socket with a compact arc pistol. The greenskin peeled away under the wheels of the convoy behind them. The battle dissolved into a three-way massacre. Human cults trying to reach the tanks. Orcs trying to kill the humans because they were there. Mechanicus units trying to preserve fuel and doctrinal composure in equal measure. Magos Vane did not retreat. Of course he didn't. Men like him were incapable of understanding that some prizes cost more than they were worth until the receipt was stamped in blood. Continue extraction, he barked over the convoy vox. Defensive losses acceptable. Max heard that and understood immediately that the priest would burn every soul there if it won him another drum of fuel. He drove harder. The biggest orc wagon thundered into the perimeter, flattening a Skitarius under its front plate. Max turned directly toward it, because the only thing more dangerous than meeting force head-on was letting it choose its angle. The interceptor hit the wagon's side just behind the front wheel. Not enough to stop it, enough to spoil its turn. The wagon slewed wide and smashed into a Duna rider instead of plowing through the exposed servitors. Stubbers from both vehicles erupted at once. Human, orc, and machine shrapnel filled the air. "Why are you helping us?" Lyra, 7, shouted over the roar. "I'm helping me," which was true, mostly. By the time the Magos called withdrawal, the flats were an inferno of burning promethium and screaming engines. The Mechanicus had fuel. They had also lost 6 Skitarii, 3 servitors, and a chunk of one Dunarider's track assembly. The road cults had lost more. The orcs had lost the most and enjoyed it the hardest. As the convoy limped away from the depot, the interceptor developed a metallic cough deep in the engine block. Lyra, 7, heard it instantly. "Damage. It'll run. Everything runs until it doesn't." He did not answer. There was no point. She was right. They made camp under the leaning corpse of a collapsed hive buttress, where the ash winds broke enough to let men think. Magos Vane demanded access to the interceptor at once. Max refused with a shotgun across the hood and murder plain in his eyes. The standoff might have ended there if Lyra, 7, had not stepped between them and said she would oversee the repairs personally. The Magos agreed because he still needed a driver more than a relic. Under the open hood, the engine looked like a wounded animal that had learned to bite through pain. Coolant line split. Injector fouled. Belt half frayed. Housing stress on the supercharger mounts. Max worked with hands blackened by old grease, while Lyra, 7, passed tools with mechanical precision and studied every improvised fix like it was forbidden scripture. "You keep it alive with salvage and instinct," she said. "That's usually enough. For you, perhaps. For anything." She looked at him then. Really looked. And something in her expression changed. Not softening. Clarifying. "The Magos sees a template to be extracted," she said. "A thing to own. And you? I am beginning to suspect that ownership is the wrong framework." Max tightened the clamp on the replacement line until the metal complained. "That realization might get you killed where you're from." "I am on Varnak now," That was almost a joke. Almost. By dusk, the interceptor coughed back to life. Not healthy. Alive. The convoy pushed deeper into the dead zones over the next days. Old core foundries. Data vaults. Ruined mag rails. Places locals avoided because machines still whispered there after dark. Max guided them, because every road backward was now watched by somebody who wanted either the car, the fuel, or the driver's corpse. The first vault they breached was guarded by madness. It rose from the sand as a black stone pyramid, smooth-sided and untouched by erosion, its surface etched with Mars sigils older than the Imperium itself. Melta-charges opened the outer seal. Inside waited rank upon rank of obsolete servitors, still carrying out instructions centuries after purpose had rotted away. When the Mechanicus intrusion tripped dormant code wards, the entire vault woke like an infected nerve. Max had seen men go mad. He had never seen machines do it. Servitors rushed the breach with tools spinning, flesh long spoiled around. Still functioning augmetics. Corridor guns emerged from wall recesses. Vox systems screamed Benheric prayers corrupted into static. Deeper inside, something heavier moved one of the old battle automata, a Castellan robot whose loyalty had been eaten by centuries of isolation and machine fever. Its phosphor blasters turned the first ranks of Skitarii into burning silhouettes. That was enough for Max. He fired until the shotgun clicked empty, then drew the convoy back by movement and refusal rather than obedience. Lyra, 7, fought beside him, cold and quick, her mechadendrite punching through the faceplate of a lunging servitor and ripping out a fistful of cables. The Magos himself covered the retreat, with impossible weapons hidden in his chassis, plasma and gravbeam, and things that made metal fold like paper. They escaped with nothing except casualties, and proof that old knowledge on Varnak still had teeth. The second vault was worse because it almost rewarded them. They found it in the scream fields, where rusted power towers sang like men dying when the wind ran through their hollow cores. The dome itself was smaller than the first site, sealed beneath drifts, but intact. Vane opened it by speaking in machine code for 2 hours straight, while the world groaned around them. Inside were banks of pristine data crystals. Real ones. Working, untouched. For the first time, Max saw open greed on a Mechanicus face. Vane sent priests and servitors inside to harvest the data, while the convoy formed a perimeter. Max stayed out by the interceptor with Lyra, 7, and watched the horizon ignite, not metaphorically, literally. Engine fires, headlamps, torches, hundreds of them. Every survivor tribe, fuel, creed, orc mob, and road cannibal for 100 kilometers must have felt the vault wake. They came from all directions, as if the whole dead world had decided to collect a debt. Lyra, 7, saw it too. He will not leave. No, he believes the knowledge is worth the risk. He believes everyone else is what the risk is for. The first shells landed 30 seconds later. Human rigs hammered the perimeter from the east, while orc bikes screamed in from the north and south, happy to shoot anybody moving. The last Dunarider stubbers ran white-hot. Skitarii dropped in disciplined pairs. Servitors were torn apart where they stood. The vault mouth flashed with internal lumens as priests inside continued transferring crystal archives while the battle outside collapsed into bedlam. Max fought because the alternative was dying still. He used the interceptor as a blade, not a shield, carving lanes through incoming attackers, breaking momentum, forcing collisions. A road truck came too close, and he shot the driver through a vision slit. An orc knob leapt onto the roof, and Lyra, 7, burned through its jaw with her pistol, then finished it by slamming the passenger door open at 90 kilometers an hour and taking its legs off. The Skitarii line bent, then broke. That was the moment the battle changed shape. Not from defense to defeat, from mission to massacre. "Get in," Max told Lyra, 7. Her head snapped toward the vault. "The Magos is already dead, whether he knows it or not. That is treason. That's survival." She hesitated, one heartbeat too long. Max grabbed her arm and yanked her through the passenger side. Then he slammed the interceptor into reverse, spun off the killing ground, and punched through the weakest point in the encirclement before anyone fully understood he was leaving. They were chased immediately. Orcs first. Always orcs first. Half a dozen warbikes and one chopped-down racer truck tore after them, engines shrieking in delight. Human vehicles followed more cautiously. Not because they lacked courage, but because they still valued their own skin enough to let the greenskins test the danger. Max drove into the screen fields. Steel towers rose around them in crooked forests. The wind wailed through broken conduits and hanging cable nests, making the whole landscape sound alive and furious. Shadows pulsed between the pylons. The ground alternated between hardpan and grave-soft drifts that could swallow a wheel if you guessed wrong. Max guessed right often enough to stay breathing. The orcs did not care about guessing. They came fast, spraying lead and laughter. One bike clipped a buried junction box and exploded. Another mounted a ridge of slag too hard, launched into the air, and vanished into the dark between towers. The truck kept coming, driver howling through missing teeth, front ram covered in trophies. Up ahead, through the iron forest, Max saw a road. Not an old road, not Varnak IV. Something black and perfectly smooth, untouched by age or weather, cutting a straight line east through the wastes like a blade laid on sand. He had never seen it before. Nobody had. He did not question it. The interceptor seemed to recognize it before he did. The engine note changed as soon as the tires touched that surface. The whole car settled, smoother, cleaner, almost relieved. Behind them, the orc truck hit the black road and instantly lost control. Its suspension was built for chaos, not precision. It fishtailed, clipped a warbike, rolled twice, and became a brilliant ball of fire. The remaining bikes scattered or died behind the wreckage. Silence fell with shocking speed. Only the V8 remained, purring now rather than snarling. Lyra, 7, stared out through the cracked windshield. This road does not exist on any survey. Seems to now. It may be a guidance construct, a concealed route, a reactive path. Then it picked a hell of a time. The road carried them east under a sky turning bruised dark. The wasteland changed around them. The debris fields thinned. The wrecks vanished. Half-buried structures appeared under the sand, too elegant for Imperial industry, curved and seamless, as if they had been grown from white stone instead of assembled. Symbols covered them that hurt the eye if you stared too long. Not because they were evil, but because they belonged to a design language from an age when humanity still believed the future could be beautiful. Then the road ended at a dome. It rose from the desert like a pearl the size of a city, its surface mirror-smooth and luminous under the ash clouds. But the reflection on that surface was wrong. The wastes around it were dead. In the dome skin, they appeared green, alive, whole, as if the structure did not mirror reality but memory. Max stopped 100 meters out. Neither of them spoke. The dome opened without visible seams. Not a door, an iris widening. Warm light spilled out. Lyra, 7's voice came thin through her Vox grill. The true vault, maybe. No, more than that. A preservation ark. Dark Age origin. Autonomous. Concealed. You sound excited. I sound terrified. The interceptor moved forward before Max made the choice. Not fast, not violently. Simply with certainty, as though the machine had reached the end of a long journey and knew the final turn better than its driver. Inside the dome was a world that had refused to die. Trees. Real trees. Water moving in narrow channels of polished stone. Low buildings of white composite and bronze. Silent drones tending gardens that had grown for millennia without a human hand to guide them. Air that did not taste like rust or ash or promethium. Max had forgotten air could be forgiven. At the center of that impossible sanctuary stood a plaza. At the center of the plaza stood another interceptor. Pristine. Same body. Same engine geometry. Same silhouette. Not similar. Identical. His car, without the scars. Without the patches. Without the years. Max stepped out and could not breathe for a second. A voice came from the air around them. Calm and neither male nor female, layered with the patience of machines designed to outlive empires. Designation confirmed. Pattern recognition success beyond acceptable threshold. Welcome home, Max Rockatansky. He raised the shotgun automatically. Who said that? I am Custodian Intellect Sigma, Eternum, final autonomous steward of Preservation Ark Varnak. This facility was designed to shelter viable human cultural and engineering patterns through civilizational collapse. Lyra, Seven's lenses widened. An intact Dark Age intelligence. Partial, the voice replied. Degraded. Mission. Pure. Sufficient. Max looked between his car and the untouched twin before him. What is this? A proving ground. A vault. A refuge. A memory. During the long fall of human civilization, selected machine templates and human adaptive profiles were archived here. Mobility platforms were among the preserved systems. Your vehicle is one derivative. Your behavioral signature is another. Max frowned. You're saying I was archived? Not individually, patterned. Humanity expresses survival in many forms. Conquest, faith, submission, collective order. You represent a rarer model. Persistence without illusion. Mobility without attachment. Moral function reduced to essential loyalty and selective protection. You survive collapse without becoming it. Lyra, 7, turned slowly toward him. It chose you, the custodian continued. Thousands of interceptor chassis were seeded across migration corridors, conflict zones, and declining frontier worlds in prior eras. Most were destroyed. Some were captured. A very few bonded successfully with compatible operators. One has now returned. Max stared at the pristine car. Bonded. Your machine responds to you because it was designed not merely as transport, but as extension. Human and vehicle as reciprocal survival system. Trust through endurance. Function through adversity. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Max did not have a hard answer ready, because part of him had always known the car was more than steel. Not alive the way men were alive, but faithful, responsive, present. Lyra, 7, spoke softly. This is what the Mechanicus forgot. The custodian's light shifted across the plaza. You may remain. Integration is available. Repair beyond current material limits is available. Longevity extension is available. Purpose can be formalized. Or you may depart and retain current mode of life. Max laughed once, humorless. That's not much of a sales pitch. Truth does not require sales. He walked to his own interceptor and rested a hand on the hot black hood. Old scars under his palm. Dense patch welds. Dust ground into every seam. What happens if I stay? Progressive fusion of operator profile with ARC maintenance networks and bonded vehicle systems. Identity persists in altered form. Mobility without physical failure. Function without aging. Preservation of pattern. In plain language, you stop being entirely human. Lyra, 7, looked at him, and for the first time all the machine's certainty in her face gave way to something nakedly human. Fear. Not for herself. For him. And if he leaves? She asked. The road remains open for 1 hour. The arc reseals. No second entry. That was it. Immortality in exchange for surrender. Paradise in exchange for self. Everything repaired forever, if he agreed to become one more machine that outlived the world. A younger man might have said yes. A man who wanted purpose spelled out. A man tired enough to let someone else decide what survival meant. But Max had seen too many versions of that bargain. Men became symbols. Priests became engines. Warlords became myths. None of them stayed themselves. He looked at Lyra, 7. What would your Magos do? Accept before the sentence finished. And you? She took a long time answering. I want to understand it, study it, learn from it. Part of me wants to stay forever, which is why I know I should not choose for you. He nodded. That was a better answer than he expected. Max turned back to the custodian. I leave. No anger came from the voice. No disappointment. Only acknowledgement. Confirmed. Pattern remains functionally consistent. Departure approved. The pristine interceptor did not move. It only stood in the plaza beneath white light. An unspent possibility. Max climbed back into the black car that had bled with him across a dozen hells. Lyra, 7, entered beside him. The engine turned over instantly, smoother than it had any right to, as if the arc had touched it just enough to remember what it once was. They drove out. The black road carried them back into the wastes, and dawn found them near the shattered remnants of the Mechanicus convoy. Magos Vane had survived. Of course he had. Men like him were too hateful to chance. Half his limbs were gone. One side of his face had burned down to gleaming mechanisms. 7 Skitarii remained, 1 dune rider, a handful of servitors. In his claws he held a data crystal taken from the smaller vault, and his optics blazed when he saw the interceptor return. "You abandoned, sanctified personnel," he said over external vox. "You fled with classified knowledge. By Treaty of Mars and right of reclamation, the vehicle is forfeit." Max got out slowly with the shotgun in hand. "Come take it." The remaining Skitari raised weapons. Lyra, 7 stepped between them. "Magos," Magos, she said, voice amplified and calm. "I have acquired data of greater significance than the Crystal Archive. The vehicle and operator are instrumental to further recovery. Destroying that relationship would be strategically irrational." Vane's optics fixed on her. "Explain." She did not explain in words. She transmitted a burst of encrypted machine code from her implants to his. Max could not read it. He did not need to. The Magos froze for 3 full seconds. When he spoke again, the fury had not vanished. It had merely become calculation. "Temporary continuation of custodial arrangement approved," he said, "until a secure research locus is established." Max knew a threat deferred when he heard one. So did Lyra, 7. They traveled together 3 more days through quieter wastes. The road gangs had been shattered by the Vault War. The orcs had rolled on toward louder horizons. Varnak's violence settled back into its usual simmer. On the final night, camped in the shadow of a rusted water tower, Lyra, 7 came to where Max sat beside the interceptor. "The shuttle is not coming," she said. He did not look up. "Figured." Vane sent no extraction plea after the crystal retrieval. "He intends to found a private research station here. He means to keep the data, the ruins, and your vehicle under his sole authority." "Also figured." She handed him a small slate. "Coordinates. Hidden Prometheum Reserve. Enough for months if you refine it carefully. And a northern route beyond the Magos' likely pursuit range. There is a colony there. 200 survivors. Water processors still function. Walls. Crops. It is not much. Nothing ever is." She almost smiled. "Compared to Varnak, it is a miracle." Max took the slate. "Why help me?" She looked past him to the car. "Because I examined the bond the Magos wishes to dissect, and I reached the conclusion he cannot. Some machines are not holy because they are rare. They are holy because they choose. This one chose you." Max stood. "Come with me." Her lenses dimmed for a moment. "I cannot. Not yet. The Mechanicus still owns too much of me, but perhaps ownership is not permanent." That answer sat with him a while. Near dawn, he started the interceptor and drove away from camp before the alarms could fully coordinate. By the time Vane understood what was happening, the black car was already a dwindling shape on the northern road, and the Duna Rider's tracks were too slow to matter. The colony was real. A water station built into the bones of an old treatment complex, walls of scrap and poured ferrocrete, fields of stunted grain under purifier mist, watchtowers made from refinery pipes. Ugly, fragile, honest. The people there looked at the interceptor with the same expression everyone did the first time. Fear, greed, awe, calculation. Then they looked at Max, saw a man too tired to posture and too alert to trust, and chose caution. An old woman at the gate asked, "What do you want?" Max thought about all the answers that used to fit. Fuel, shelter, ammunition, a clean line of escape. Then he looked at the settlement, at children carrying water cans, at gun emplacements made from farm gear, at people trying, badly and stubbornly, to build something that wasn't just another war camp. "Work," he said. That was enough. He stayed. At first because the Prometheum cache would not last forever and a defended water source beat dying alone. Then because the colony needed scouts and nobody on Varnak could drive like him. Then because months passed and he did not leave. He ran perimeter routes, intercepted raiders before they reached the walls, led salvage teams to dead depots and back. Sometimes he did the old things too, shot men, outran monsters, watched good ideas die in the sand. But the place held. Barely. Then a little better than barely. People stopped seeing the interceptor as loot and started seeing it as warning. If the black car was on the southern road, danger was already being handled or about to become everyone's problem. Stories formed. They always did. The ghost driver, the last road knight, the man blessed by the machine god. Max ignored them all equally. Legends were just lies that lasted longer. A year later, a convoy approached from the south flying Mechanicus signal pennants. The colony braced for war. Max climbed the watchtower with his shotgun and old optics, and when the lead figure dismounted far beyond rifle range, he recognized the posture before he recognized the face. Liu Rahu, or rather, more of whatever she had decided to become. Additional augmetics lined her spine and shoulders. Her left leg had been replaced below the knee by polished red metal supports. Her robes were cleaner, her movements more precise, but her gaze remained exactly the same. Curious, unsentimental, impossible to intimidate for long. He met her outside the gate. "Vane?" he asked. "Dead," she said. His station drew an orc warband. The data survived. He did not. Max nodded once. Natural enough ending. She looked past him at the colony, then at the interceptor. "I returned to Mars," she said. "I delivered what I could without revealing what should remain hidden. I received rank, resources, and a charter to study Varnak's vault networks under revised authority. It means I can build something better than Vane would have. Small stations, negotiated supply, knowledge traded for defense rather than taken by force. If I fail, the old Mechanicus will reclaim the mission. If I succeed," she paused, "then perhaps some of them will remember that human beings are not impurities in the machine." Max leaned against the hood of the interceptor. "And where do I fit in?" She glanced at the car. "Exactly where you always did. On the road. Only now the road could lead somewhere." He barked a dry laugh. "That's optimistic. I have been spending time with colonists. It is contagious." He looked north toward the fields, south toward the wastes, and at last down at his own hand resting on black steel. The car was still there. The road was still there. None of the old truths had changed. A man could still die tomorrow for something stupid. Fuel still mattered more than ideals when the tank ran dry. The galaxy was still vast enough to erase any victory worth having. But the colony existed. Lyra, 7 existed. A hidden dome in the wasteland existed, preserving the memory that men and machines had once been built to carry one another instead of kneel in fear. Maybe that was enough. "I'll guide you," Max said. "No sanctification, no ownership claims. No one touches the car without my say." Lyra, 7 extended her hand, not with priestly stiffness now, but like a person making a deal she intended to keep. "Agreed." Max shook it. After that, the roads of Varnak changed slowly, which was the only way worlds like that ever changed at all. Colonies linked by escorted convoys instead of raider taxes. Mechanicus outposts, trading filters and parts for maps and protection. Vaults approached with caution instead of greed. Orcs still came. Road cults still raved. Men still murdered for fuel and called it necessary. But the wastes no longer belonged only to the worst things in them. Max drove at the edge of all that. Some days he escorted Lyra, 7 survey teams, into ruin zones where ancient machine spirits hissed in the dark. Some days he ranged alone for a week at a time, chasing rumors of hidden depots or orc migrations before they reached the settlements. Some days he just drove, because motion was still the only prayer he trusted. The interceptor never failed him. Age touched it, but never won. Parts were replaced, armor repatched, glass resealed. The engine kept its hard, immortal thunder. Maybe the custodian had repaired more than it admitted. Maybe the machine had simply decided it was not done. Max never asked. Men who interrogated miracles usually ended up serving them. In the settlements, they said the black car carried an old spirit from before the Imperium. In the Mechanicus camps, they whispered that the driver had found a lost theorem of human-machine reciprocity. In the orc camps, they told each other there was a Humie out there with a proper fast car worth killing 100 rivals to steal. All of those stories were true enough to be dangerous. Max himself did not think in stories. He thought in distance, ammunition, fuel pressure, heat shimmer, cloud movement, where to brake and where not to. He thought about the colony lights behind him when he went south, and the fact that sometimes, when he came back, people were waiting at the gate and seemed relieved he was still alive. That was new. Not hope. He would never have called it that. Hope was too decorative a word for something built out of water pumps, ammo counts, and the hard certainty that someone had to hold the road if the walls were going to stand. No. What Max found on Varnak was simpler than hope. Usefulness. In another universe, on another dead world, a man like him would have kept driving until the sand finally took the wheels and the silence did the rest. In Warhammer 40K, the universe was too large and too cruel for endings that clean. There was always another warband cresting the horizon, another vault waking beneath the sand, another engine screaming in the dark. The road did not end. It just changed shape. And so Max Rockatansky did what he had always done, only now for more than himself. He drove,